It's Brunchin with Marinaro, presented by Cherry River. Here we go. Cherry River hard seltzer, only 90 calories, natural flavors, no preservatives, now available in Quebec grocery stores and at the beer store. Let's try that again. Hold on a second. Here we go. How you doing, Stu?
I'm doing well. How are you, Tony?
Very, very good. With Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette and HockeyInsideOut.com. We're talking Habs. Stu, what a week for the Montreal Canadiens. It was, when was it? It was Thursday night at around 10 to 5, quarter to 5, that we got word on orders from Quebec Public Health that the game between the Canadiens and the Philadelphia Flyers would be held without fans. And then on Friday morning, probably at around 9:30 in the morning, we got word that the game versus the Boston Bruins that was supposed to take place last night at the Bell Center was postponed. And yesterday, the Canadiens' practice was canceled for precautionary reasons. And later on in the day, we found out that Arturi Lehkonen has now entered the COVID protocol. And this morning at practice, a bunch of players from the American Hockey League have been called up. So what a past couple of days for the Canadiens. The last 3 or 4 days have been really crazy.
Yeah, and the Canadiens were supposed to fly to New York today for tomorrow night's game against the Islanders, but that's changed also. Now they're not going to fly until tomorrow. And at this point, you wonder if the game's going to be played. I mean, there's just so many COVID cases breaking out across the NHL. You know, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Canucks, the Panthers, the Predators. There's so many cases, and every day there's more and more. And you just wonder how much longer they can keep going like this. I mean, the Canadiens now look like the Laval Rocket more than the Canadiens. Same with some of the other teams around the NHL, just desperately calling up players. You have teams that have played 1 or 2 players short for a game. You have teams that have had to call up an emergency backup goalie after a goalie tested positive. So you wonder how much longer the NHL can allow this to keep going without shutting down for some kind of a pause and trying to get this thing under control. I think it's just a matter of time before that happens. Let's
go through it, Stu. The Canadiens' lines of practice this morning: Suzuki in between Evans on his right and Hoffman on his left. Dauphin with Ylonen on his right and Drouin on his left. Paling with Caulfield on his right. Belzile, who was called up, on his left. Vedamo with Harvey Pinard on his right and Pezzetta on his left. Gallagher and Byron are extras. No contact there. Sherratt, Savard, Romanov, Petry, Kulak, and Clag. Let's take a look at the forward position in particular, Stu. Dauphin has played with the Rocket this season. Ylonen has played with the Rocket this season. Paling has. Caulfield has. Belzile has. Vedamo has. Pezzetta has. And Harvey Pinard has. 8 of the 12 forwards for the Canadiens have had time with the Laval Rocket this season. Most of them have had more time with the Rocket than they have had with the Canadiens.
As I said, it looks like the Laval Rocket with a couple of Habs players added in, as opposed to the other way around. And other teams around the league are going through. The thing is, and I hope I'm wrong on this, Tony, but Lehkonen tested positive yesterday.
Yeah.
And it'd be surprising if more players don't test positive today or moving forward, because if you look at what's happened with other teams, 1 or 2 guys test positive. The next day, it's 2 or 3 more, and it just continues on like a domino effect. Even before COVID, when a flu would go through the Canadiens' locker room, remember how fast it would go through the room? I mean, these guys are on the same plane together, the same buses together, same locker rooms together, same showers together. So any kind of bug, even before COVID, that gets into an NHL locker room, it spreads like wildfire. And I hope I'm wrong. I was sort of surprised when Gallagher and Niku had tested positive at the beginning of December. They were both back on the ice of practice today. But I was surprised after those 2 tested positive that there wasn't more. And they tested positive, obviously, after Marc Bergevin tested positive. So, but this new variant is so much more contagious.
Yeah.
Again, I hope I'm wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the next today or tomorrow and the next couple of days we see more guys testing positive. And the NHLPA announced yesterday that now they've gone back. They're going to be tested every single day, the players. And there could be retests on game days right before the game if it looks like there are cases with the team. And I imagine if the Canadiens do play tomorrow night in New York, that'll be the case. I imagine they'll be tested tomorrow morning, and they'll probably be tested again before the game just because there's already at least 1 live case on the team.
Stu, let's put the cards on the table. Because of the line of work that you do, you obviously don't want to see a pause in the season. And because of the line of work that I do, I obviously don't want to see a pause in the season either. So from professional and selfish, opinions or reasons, we don't want there to be a pause in the season. But there should be a pause in the season because this thing has been, like you said, spreading like wildfire, especially over the last couple of weeks here in the National Hockey League. And, there have been a couple of cases where a player was actually, the results of the tests were actually late. And the player took part in the game. And then midway through the game, a player was pulled off the ice because his result came in positive. So listen, it's not being done right here. It really isn't. Nick Cousins last week basically pleaded on social media and said, hey, come on, let's go. I mean, give us off until after Christmas. Make everyone come back healthy and ready to go. And that's it. They have to, so they can't even, some of them can't even enjoy Christmas with their families. They're going to be in isolation.
Yep. That's the other thing. I was supposed to go on the road trip to Nashville and to St. Louis. I don't travel with the team. I travel on my own. And I backed out of it just because of concerns. I know in Nashville, there's no masks. There's nothing else going on. And the same with the Florida trip after Christmas. The concern, I'm triple vaccinated at my booster. But the other concern is if you do catch it, you end up having a quarantine wherever you are. And you look what's happened. Like the Leafs had to have 2 separate charter planes to fly back the guys from Vancouver who hadn't tested positive and those who had. So that's something in the back of these players' minds, especially around Christmas time. They want to be with their families like everybody else. From a business standpoint, which is what Gary Bettman's looking at, this is the time of the year the NHL makes a lot of money. Around Christmas time, you're selling gifts, there's sweaters, there's games, there's tickets, the New Year's Day Winter Classic coming up. And, I hate to say it, but Gary Bettman has shown in the past how little regard he has for the health of the players when it comes to CTE and concussions and the Kyle Beach situation and all that. He's a lawyer and a businessman. And I wonder, that should be shut down. I think they got to figure out. The other thing is a lot of these players who are testing positive aren't having any symptoms. And Steve Yzerman said yesterday that, why are we testing players who don't have any symptoms? We're getting positive tests for guys who are healthy and could still play. So I think the NHL's got to shut down for a little while and figure out how they're going to do this. If players are positive and they don't have any symptoms, are they going to let them play? Are they going to go back into a bubble, which at this point might be the best thing to do?
Well, I was just going there, Stu, because hold on a second. If the players are positive but don't have any symptoms, okay, but you allow them to play, this thing's never going to go away.
Well, exactly. And that's what the NHL needs to do. The solution is a pause and the bubble. They don't want that, obviously, because in the bubble, you're not selling tickets, so there's no revenue coming in, number one. Number two, the players and the staff did not like being in a bubble. But guess what? They pulled it off last year in the bubble, Stu. They did. And from a mental standpoint, the bubble can't be easy. Our media friend Eric Engels was in Florida. He tested positive after the meetings they had there, and he's in quarantine in a hotel room for 10 days in Florida right now by himself. That it can't be easy. And my thoughts go out to Eric, and I hope he's doing okay. For last I talked to him, he said he was feeling much better. But there's just so much involved in, like, Steve Yzerman can't be the only guy in the NHL who's feeling that way. And if the NHLPA and the NHL want to go into a bubble and let guys play who test positive with no symptoms, that's their choice if they want to do that. But these guys also leave the rink and they're still going back home and groceries or whatever. I know the NHL and NHLPA are trying to clamp down more. They sent out new rules yesterday, going back to sort of what it was before. Players have to wear masks everywhere they are. They're not supposed to go out when they're at home, etc. But I mean, this is just, you look at the numbers going up every single day. There's 3,800 cases today in Quebec. Thankfully, there was only 3 deaths.
Yeah.
But they've got to, even if they shut down, just to figure out what they're going to do. Because right now, they're just sort of making it up on the fly. And it's not, the NHL, I mean, you have teams playing with 2 or 3 players short than what they should be. You're just asking for injuries. Backup goalies, emergency goalies, they've been backup so far, but at some point, you're going to have a game with 2 emergency goalies, 2 Zamboni drivers in net for each NHL team. I mean, how bad is that going to look?
Yeah, let's try to, Stu, let's try to get to as many questions as possible. And sharing is caring. If you share this video, and that's pretty cool, we'll comment with your Habs questions. Marinaro, Stu Cowan, Ethan Bondi. It's the Sick Podcast. Do you think the National Hockey League will do a Canadian division like last year? Will the Habs make it if they do? Stu, I say this. Even though I think the solution will be to go into the bubble, I don't know how you can change divisions at this point. You've had your first 30-plus games of the season in your regular divisions, and to switch over to the Canadian division, it just doesn't make any sense to me, Stu. I don't see that happening at all. How about you?
No, it can't happen. And I think if there is a bubble situation, I could see – it's interesting to see what happens in the States too, because the States might just keep continuing playing in front of 18,000 fans. I mean, there's football games yesterday in the States with 50, 60,000 people, no masks. It's like COVID doesn't exist. So the bubble, I don't know how they do it. Like with American teams coming in here, do you set up maybe 2 Canadian cities where the American teams come into and they play out of those 2 arenas and don't leave? But I mean, this thing is just, it's spreading like crazy. And I really, even vaccinated people who can get it. Thankfully, vaccinated people aren't getting as sick from it as people who aren't vaccinated. But again, they got to, it's just, I don't know what the plan is or what the best plan is right now, but I think the NHL's got to get their bosses and the NHLPA together and take a week off and figure out how are we going to move forward with this, because it's going to be, as you said, an all Canadian division would be a good idea from a safety standpoint.
Yeah.
But, as I said, in the States, it's almost like COVID doesn't exist in some places, which is, I didn't go to Nashville because of that reason. And Dan Rogers, my buddy, the play-by-play guy for TSN Radio, was there. They weren't allowed to go out, but he said Nashville was as busy as he's ever seen it. The bars were packed, no masks, no nothing. And, the NHL, all the NHL teams traveling through the States are exposed to this environment.
Steph Lagachette should start the playoffs right now in a bubble. In a way, it would be good, in a way, because the Canadians would be, the second worst team in hockey, and no pain, no shame, and a chance to win the lottery, and Shane Wright. It would be kind of cool. But no, Stu, listen, they set out on an 82-game season. They're going to try their very best to have an 82-game season. If they have to shorten the season at some point, they will. But there's no way it's stopping at 30-plus games here.
No, it's not stopping now. If it did, maybe for the 3rd year in a row, the Canadians would get into the playoffs because of COVID. I mean, they shouldn't have been in the last 2 years if they were
I hear you.
Playoff. But no, that's not going to happen. And I think, there's been talk about there's that 3-week break in the schedule for the Olympics. And I can't see the NHL players going to the Olympics at this point. So a lot of talk, well, why don't they just put the games during that 3-week period?
Yeah.
The problem with that is a lot of the arenas have already been booked for other events during those 3 weeks or concerts or whatever. So it's not like all the dates are available. But
hold on a second. Hence the bubble. And here's a question from Moochie Goodleaf. Pass on the Olympics too. If you're positive and have to quarantine, you're there for 5 weeks minimum, which is true. Yes and no. If you're at the Olympics and you test positive, you have to quarantine anywhere between 3 to 5 weeks, anywhere between 21 to 35 days. And obviously nobody wants to do that. And if the players come back from the Olympics and they resume play, and obviously those players that would go represent their countries at the Olympics would be very key players on their National Hockey League teams. If they're not going to be able to rejoin for a push to make the playoffs, their teams are not going to be happy. So, Stu, the numbers are growing, like you said. More and more players are entering the COVID protocol. They're going to need, the National Hockey League is going to need a window where they can make up games. I know you said a lot of the arenas are booked, and you're right, but that's when the whole bubble comes in. So I say, Stu, I can't see them going to the Olympics at this point. I mean, I would bet against it.
No, and maybe they end up reducing the season to 70 games or something like that. That's still a legitimate NHL season, in my opinion, if they play 70 games. But Gary Bettman and the owners never wanted the players to go to the Olympics. I mean, that hurts their business, right? They negotiated in the CBA with the players. The players really wanted to go, and kudos to the NHL players for wanting to go represent their countries.
Well, it is marketing for the players and marketing for the National Hockey League. So it hurts their business maybe from one standpoint. From another standpoint, I think it helps.
Yeah, but I think if you took a vote of the owners, they would prefer that the players didn't go.
I would agree with you on that one.
The same with Gary Bettman. So, I mean, even Bettman's recent statements are basically like, well, we prefer, basically saying that we prefer they don't go, but we negotiated this into the CBA and we'll respect that thing. Unless, as he said, it's having such an impact on our season that we might not be able to complete our season, or we need that period to make up games. So, yeah, at this point, I can't imagine it happening. I can't imagine an NHL player really wanting to go to the Olympics now. As you said, you're going over there for 3 weeks and you spend another 3 weeks in quarantine. You're going to be away from your family and away from the team that's paying your salary while they're continuing on
I've
never been an NHL player, but to me, just as a father and a guy with a family, like I wouldn't want to risk that going over there and being stuck there for 5 weeks away from my family. And in a communist country, a country like China, it's one thing to be in Florida in quarantine. It's another thing to be in China, I think.
Yeah, here's Mike. What do you guys think of the Norlinder situation? Stu, why don't you go first? Because I know I have a take on this one. Go.
I wonder now if Matthias Norlinder is wishing he maybe hadn't signed with the Canadiens and he could go elsewhere after 2 years, because there's no doubt that the best place for him right now is Laval. I mean, he's got to adjust to playing on the smaller rink. He's got to adjust to, Dominic Ducharme talked about the harder forecheck, less time to make decisions, thinking quicker. It seems to me like he was homesick. He wasn't happy here, I guess. The fact he was injured during training camp probably didn't help, and he was by himself a lot, sort of away from the team. He went and played in Laval, probably rode the bus a few times, didn't like it. Said, I'm going to be happier if I just go back home to Sweden. And that's what he did. So it's not the best thing for the Canadiens. It's not the best thing for his development, but it's what he wanted to do. And I guess the Canadiens figured, well, it's no use having him here if he's not happy and he's going to be miserable. So they let him go back to Sweden. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens now moving forward.
Yeah.
How the Canadiens react to him deciding to do that way. Is this a guy they still want to deal with? Is this a guy that maybe they think about moving on? But I think it's just a case he wasn't happy here and he wanted to go back home to Sweden, so he did.
I don't like it. When players go away, amateur or professional, yes, they get homesick. It's a normal human reaction, but you have to get it out, and you have to wait it out. You have to see it out. And and like you mentioned, Laval is the best place for him. He would be accustomed more to the North American game. In Laval, they're pretty much trying to play the way the Canadiens are playing this way. When you get called up, the transition is easier. By him being at Laval, if there's an emergency situation because of COVID or injury, you get to recall him right away. He gets to practice with NHLers. He gets to get in a couple of games with NHLers. He gets to play with NHLers. And the sooner he dives into hockey in North America, the sooner he gets accustomed to it. So now, boom, what is he doing? He's going back to Sweden. I don't like it at all. It almost leads me to believe that if he's not going to make the big team, even next year, that he kind of won't want to be here. And I don't like it at all. I get the fact that if a player's not happy, you want him go back to his environment and out of your environment, because he's only going to make other people unhappy by him being unhappy. But I don't like it. And I would have liked to have seen Norlinder stay for the main reason that this Canadiens blue line is going to change next year. And, it would be good to have him here to see how he would progress, to see if he can step into this Canadiens blue line next year. Because, Stu, from the Canadiens blue line, who do you think will not be back next year?
Well, Ben Sherrod's going to get traded before the trade.
I agree.
Jeff Petry, are they going to trade Jeff Petry? I don't know. David Savard. I mean, no, I don't even think Jeff Gorton is right now.
Stu?
The other thing with Norlinder, if you went to Laval, you'd be getting a ton of ice time, playing in all situations, playing and getting used to the smaller rink. And like moving forward, as you said, so what happens if he comes here next year, doesn't make the team, and I'm not happy here, I want to go back home to Sweden. Like, I'm wondering now, maybe does he decide that he just wants to play in Sweden, or does he want to go to another NHL team, tell his agent, get me out of Montreal, I don't want to be there. So
I'm going to pick up on what you just said. Jeff Petry. Stu, they're going to trade him.
I think so. And I think
Stu, he's not happy here.
No, and especially if they're keeping Dominic Ducharme moving forward as coach. And after Petry's comments last week, I think they're going to move him.
And by the way, for some, because the way some are, right, Stu? Listen, I got to tell you something. The media isn't perfect, all right? But most of us, I mean, those who are pretty good at their job, are connected to the situation, all right? And those who are not in the media say, the media is making too much out of something, out of nothing. And you know what? Petry actually said it was the players too, this and that. Petry is not buying what Dominic Ducharme is selling, okay? He doesn't like where this is going. He doesn't like how this is coached. And Jeff Petry is going to be moved. I'm going to tell you that right now, okay? I'm going to tell you right now, whether he's moved before the deadline or he's moved at the draft or he's moved in the offseason, Jeff Petry will not be a Montreal Canadian when next season starts. I'm going to tell you that right now. Cut it, clip it, record it, save it. You can come back if I'm wrong and say you were wrong. I'm not going to be wrong on this one. When I tell you a player is going to be traded, the way I told you for PK Subban, and I told you he'd be traded at the draft. He was traded 3 or 4 days after the draft. Sorry. The way I told you Max Pacioretty would not be a Montreal Canadian by the Canadiens golf tournament. He was traded the day before the golf tournament. I'm telling you right now that Jeff Petry will not be a Montreal Canadian to start next season. So he's either getting traded by the deadline or he's traded at the draft. Off season, Jeff Petry's getting traded. Take it to the bank.
Well,
Yanni says,
I wrote in a column last week, Petry's an alternate captain on this team. He's usually a soft-spoken, intelligent, thoughtful guy. He wasn't just speaking for himself when he made those comments. He was speaking, I'm sure, for other guys in the room who weren't happy with what's going on with this this coach and this system that he's been trying to put in place since last season. And, with Weber gone and Price gone and Corey Perry gone, the guys that Petry was a leader with last season, all gone. I think it's sort of the weight's on him. And he's, as you said, he's not happy. And he's not happy. And he hasn't played well. And you wonder how much that unhappiness figures into it. Him and Carey Price are really close friends. Their wives are close friends. I've wondered how much the Carey Price situation has weighed on him also.
Petry was demoralized going into the season for sure. But yes, he also sees the team getting younger, the team getting revamped. He's not going to win a Stanley Cup anytime soon. And he's not the president of the Dominic Ducharme fan club. I think it's safe to say. Yanni K, please.
Tony, for 5 years in Edmonton, he played on bad teams that never made the playoffs, right?
Yeah.
Then he came here, and one of the reasons he re-signed rather than testing free agency is he loved the playoff atmosphere at the Bell Center. He got his first exposure to NHL playoffs. He loved it, so he re-signed. This team is not going to be in the playoffs for a long time, for a few more years this year and a few more years after.
Yeah.
That. I'm sure he doesn't want to be around for that. And as I said, his comments last week were thought out. He didn't just go in there and blowing off. The next day, Ben Sherrod said, guys, after a game, they blow off steam. Some guys are like that. Jeff Petry's not like that.
Yeah.
Jeff Petry was what he said, and he'd hinted at it before. It's not the first time.
No, he's been talking about it for months. Yeah.
He'd had enough. And when he went into that, he was asked a very simple question, like, is there anything new to say? I think that was the question he was asked. And then that's what he said. So
it was calculated. It was frustration, but it was calculated frustration.
Calculated, exactly.
All right. Yanni K, please help settle a disagreement. Is a contender going to pick up Paquette for a 6th round pick or something at the deadline? Sharing is caring. Share this video with your friends, comment, and we'll get to all your questions. Stu, I say this. Before the deadline, teams are usually willing to pick up as many players as possible if they're going to the playoffs and if they're a contender. Why? Because there's no salary cap come playoff time. And there's no certain amount of players, no limit on the amount of players that you can have, right? So at the same time, Cedric Paquette is having a really hard time keeping up. He's having a hard time skating. So I think this one is one of those bets that can really go 50-50. It's not because I don't want to answer it, but because there's no cap and because there's no limit on the amount of players. Yes, I could see it happening. Every team wants depth. The way the Canadiens picked up depth last year. But at the same time, he's running out of gas.
I can't imagine any NHL scout watching him this season and going to his GM and saying, this guy could help us. No, I'd be surprised. I think Cedric Paquette's days in the NHL are nearing an end.
All right, more questions. And Marco Monaco. Tony and Stu, you guys are great. Thank you. I think Gouli over Norlinder any day, and he's more NHL ready. Do you agree? 2 different defensemen. One is bigger, Goalie. One is stronger, Goalie. Goalie does have a good first pass, but Norlinder's more the kind of guy that I think can quarterback a power play going forward. I want both, Stu.
I want both. I mean, there's no doubt Goulet right now is much more NHL ready. I think not just as a player, but I think mentally, what we were talking about before with Norlinder being homesick, wanting to go back to Sweden. Goulet, here's a kid who just got traded from Prince Albert to Edmonton. He's going to be going to a new city and a new team in his junior team. He's at the World Juniors right now. When he was around the team and the interviews, he's so mature. It's incredible. Like I was saying, I can't believe this kid's about 19 years old when he was talking with us on the media. Confident, a cool, calm confidence that he has on the ice and off the ice. He looks like the real deal to me. I think this kid's going to be a really good defenseman in the NHL. And I think both mentally and physically, he's more ready than Norlinder right now. Having said that, Norlinder has the skills we saw during training camp, and at least he can move the puck, he can skate. As Dominic Ducharme said, he's got to get used to the more aggressive forecheck. You'd see times he get hit hard in the corner when he had the puck. Guys are on you right away in the NHL, even in the AHL on that smaller rink. You don't have that time you have in Sweden on the big rink to think more before you make a move, which is why, as we were saying before, he would have been much better off in Laval. But at this point, there's no doubt that Goulet is more ready to play in the NHL, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see Goulet with the Canadiens next season.
You can follow the Sick Podcast on our Facebook page at the Sick Podcast. You can follow us on Instagram at the Sick Podcasts, and follow us on YouTube. Take a look at our channel, subscribe. It's absolutely for free. And if you want to listen to us, you can listen to us via iHeartRadio app as well. Renaud, did Cayden Primeau hurt his knee or his head on the last shutout play of the Philly game? He looked pretty upset about it. Stu, it seems to me he was favoring his lower back. Did you see that?
Yeah.
He was making his way off the ice?
We haven't heard any update. All we've heard is that he was sent back to Laval, which was the plan before. When they called him up, they said he was coming up to play one game and get sent down. So, yeah, either his back or his groin, the way he got sort of jammed up against the post. But, I mean, it describes the Canadian season perfectly, right? They finally get a win. No fans in the stadium because of COVID. The kid gets called up from Laval, plays really well, makes the winning save on a shootout, and gets hurt. It's like whatever can go wrong will go wrong for this Canadiens team. But
I am the president. I'm the president of the Cayden Primeau fan club. Okay, yeah. He is the future. You think he is?
Heard any updates? So we don't know yet. We'll find out, I guess, if there was anything serious or not moving forward. But at this point, I mean, Laval didn't play last night. Their game was postponed because of COVID. So at this point, uncertain. But hopefully he wasn't hurt because, as you said, the match get called up, play a great game, make the winning save on a shootout, and get hurt doing it.
Are you the president of the Cayden Primeau fan club as well?
I'm not totally sold yet. I mean, he was a 7th round draft pick, and there's reasons why. There was obviously holes in his game that the scouts saw when he was before drafting him, which is why he was there that late. He might just be a late bloomer. He won the NCAA Best Goalie Award after he was drafted. Last season, he looked a little shell-shocked when he got called up to the NHL, like he wasn't ready. So I'm not 100% sold yet, Tony, and I don't know if the Canadiens are either. I think that's one of the reasons Jeff Gorton called him up for that one game. He wanted to get a first-hand look at this kid in the NHL. And Primeau, to his credit, played well, and I'm sure he impressed Gorton with his performance that night. But I'm not 100% sold yet on him being the goalie of the future.
I am. Listen, the goalie of the future, he's going to play here for sure. Whether or not he could end up being elite, I don't know. But I think he's got the pedigree, Stu. I think he's got all the tools.
No, we'll see. I mean, he's a big kid. That's why the Canadiens drafted him in the 7th round, right? They took a chance on a big goalie, athletic, NHL pedigree. His dad played in the NHL, even though his dad wasn't a goalie. But so the 7th round, you're grasping for straws, right? And the Canadiens have had luck in the 7th round. They had Jake Evans in the 7th round also, so maybe they'll get lucky also with Cayden Primeau. But again, one NHL scout once told me there's reasons guys are 6th, 7th round draft picks, and they might fool you for a little while in the NHL, but most of the time they go back to what they were when the scouts saw them before. So maybe Cayden Primeau will be different. Maybe he's a late bloomer there.
I hear you.
Bloomers also.
But the Datsyuks and the Zetterbergs of this world were drafted late as well, and they went on to have pretty good careers. Thank you very much. I would imagine he's okay, seeing as he backed up McNiven on Friday night versus Providence, so I would think he's okay. Curtis Alt says, how do you see the World Juniors going with the Omicron issue, Stu?
That's going to be interesting. That's you have to think that the virus is going to spread through the tournament just because it's spreading everywhere else, and I think they're going to have the same issues that the NHL is having right now. I just think it's the reality of the world we're living in right now. I can't see why it would be any different at the World Juniors than it is anywhere else.
More questions coming in on the Sick Podcast. Brunchin with Marinaro, presented by Cherry River Hard Seltzer. Did you hear about the Philly game being canceled for fans before the rest of the media?
No, I found out when the Canadians sent out the tweet. So I imagine everybody was the same way.
A couple of hours before. You had to feel for people coming from out of town, right? A buddy of mine texted me. There was a family in from Brazil to watch the hockey game. Now, I would hope that they actually came from Brazil to do other things and picked up tickets and were going to the hockey game instead of actually coming here to watch the hockey game, and that was the reason. But anyway, Andrew Bunce
came in from Wisconsin also.
Yeah, I would imagine that he could have got himself into the building if he wanted to. Don't you think?
Yeah, maybe. And I don't know if the Canadians would want to risk that if it did get out, if somebody there's a picture or something of his dad.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah. That's a good point. That's a good point. I was thinking, if he's all the way up there, but yeah, that's a pretty good point. Andrew Bunce says Ducharme doesn't give rookies a shot. Julien 2.0. Norlinder never had a chance.
Norlinder, they give Norlinder a chance. He played here and he played, minutes, and he looked exactly what Ducharme said. He looked like he couldn't react, couldn't think quick enough, and couldn't move the puck quick enough. He was getting hit a lot in his own end against the boards.
Wasn't ready.
So I thought they give him. No, I thought they give him. You're not going to bring him in and play him 25 minutes a game. Don't forget, he was also coming off an injury. Didn't have a full training camp in that. So I think they put him out there. They gave him a chance. They saw what they saw, and they figured the best thing for him was to go back to Laval. And I have to agree with them.
I don't have to defend Dominic Ducharme. I've given my opinion. I know this year was very, very challenging. The team was weaker on paper going into the season. Then there were obvious setbacks with Price and Weber not being back, and Deneau moved on, and Edmondson hurt, and Byron hurt. All that stuff. I still don't think he's coached well. I still think there's too many decisions that he makes that has me scratching my head. I still don't think he's done a good job motivating his players. I don't think he's done a good job with their special teams. I don't think his team has come ready to play. I think he's a step behind on the matchup situation. I don't think his lines always make sense. I mean, the list goes on and on, right? I don't think players have figured out his system. Having said all that, I'm going to say this. I don't blame Dominic Ducharme for his ice time that he gave some of the players at the beginning of the season. At the beginning of the season, Marc Bergevin was the general manager of this team, and Bergevin was feeling the heat. And because Bergevin was feeling the heat, Ducharme was feeling the heat. And Ducharme had to win hockey games because this team under Bergevin absolutely had to make the playoffs. Once it's became apparent that this team was not going to make the playoffs, and Marc Bergevin was relieved of his duties, and Jeff Gordon was brought in, and Gordon said the coach is going to be fine, it looks like they're okay if they don't win hockey games. And they have a bunch of players now that are in the lineup, and I think he's giving those players the ice time. So I don't blame him for not giving some of the younger players ice time at the beginning of the season. He's no different than any other coach. They feel pressure to win. They feel pressure to make the playoffs, and they believe that veterans give you the best chance because they've been there, they've done that, and they're probably more reliable players.
Yeah, every coach in the NHL trusts their veterans over their kids. I mean, Ryan Palin spoke about that, and he said, the AHL either makes you or breaks you, and there's some guys down there, very few, there's the stars that are going to go right up to the NHL. The other guys in the AHL, their job there is to learn how to play so that the NHL coach will trust them when they get up there. And that's what it is, the player coaches go with the players they trust, and they trust the veterans. And moving forward, you're right. Dominic Ducharme's trying to save his job and his future in the NHL. Jeff Gorton said his job is safe until the end of the season. I think the main reason for that is that Jeff Molson doesn't want to pay 3 head coaches this season. But it's up to Jeff Gorton to tell Ducharme, if that's what they're going for, play the kids. I want to see X amount of minutes for this guy. I want to see X amount of minutes for that guy. I want to see this guy in the power play. I want to see this guy in penalty killing. That's Gorton's role to tell the coach to do that. And even if Ducharme doesn't like it, they're paying him $1.7 million this year to coach. And if if your boss tells you to do something, that's what you want to do. That's your job. So it'll be interesting to see moving forward. Again, calling up Cayden Primeau for the one game. I'm sure it was Gorton's thing. He wanted to call him up, wanted to see him, wanted to play him a full game, and then send him back down to Laval. And so we'll see moving forward what happens with Dominic Ducharme. And the one thing he seems to have been, as I mentioned earlier, Jeff Petry had spoken about the system more than once. The system issue goes back to last season when the players talked about how confusing it was to try and figure it out after Ducharme came in as head coach. It finally seemed to start to click during the playoffs, and you have to wonder how much of an impact Shea Weber, Corey Perry, some of the other veteran guys on the team had to do with that, not just the coach. All those guys were gone to start this season, and it seemed like they were back to square one, trying to figure out Dominic Ducharme's system, and a lot of confusion. And guys, as I've written before, they're thinking more instead of playing more. And I think if it was Jeff Gorton's decision, maybe he would be making a coaching change this season. But I think Jeff Molson is paying Claude Julien $5 million to coach this season. He's paying Dom Ducharme $1.7 million to coach. It's not like this team is going to go on a run and make the playoffs. And they also, I'm sure, want to wait until a new GM is in place, so they have a say in who the next coach is going to be for this team.
Jonathan says, if the Canadians don't end up with the first pick overall, who do you think the Canadians should draft, assuming they don't win the lottery and assuming they get the second pick? Yeah, I'm going to tackle it. I'm going to tackle it. I'll tackle this one and say, I'll start by a very generic point, okay? Make sure you take the best player in the draft, and you don't draft a centerman just because you think you need a number one centerman, okay? That was the problem with the Galchenyuk draft, and that was the problem with the Kotkaniemi draft, right? And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, right? So hopefully they don't do that. Long story short, if that kid Slavkovsky, who plays for TPS Turku, who they say is a versatile player who can play left, right, and center, is the best talent, according to them, then he's the kid that you take, and you do not take him because you actually think he might end up being a winger instead of a centerman. Having said that, there are some really good centermen that are slated to go in the top 5. Cooley with the U.S. National Development Program, and Matthew Savoie in Winnipeg. There's Cornell, who's a right winger. But just take the best player available in the draft.
I agree with you, Tony. It's take the best player available. The Canadians have gotten in trouble in the past by not doing that. Mike McCarron, they drafted because they wanted a big guy who could play center. Then they knew he couldn't skate, and they still drafted him. Kotkaniemi. They
drafted Jared Tenorti by size too.
They've gotten in trouble too many times by drafting by position. So draft the best player available. And you know what? I'm asked a lot of times, who should they pick? I don't pretend that I'm an expert on these junior kids because I don't see them play.
Of course not.
My job is to watch the Canadians. I watch the Canadians. I can comment on Goulet because I've seen him play. But a lot of these junior guys, all I can say is what I've read from other people. The World Juniors are coming up, so I'll get a chance to watch some of them. But for me to say this kid is better than that kid, I'll just be going off what other people have written or what I might have seen on a YouTube.
Of course.
For me, it's hard to say because I haven't seen these kids play.
Stu, 90% of members of the media don't see these kids play. And they end up seeing them play at the World Juniors, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You end up seeing them play at the Memorial Cup and stuff like that. You end up seeing them play at some major tournaments. But the people that follow them night in or night out are those independent scouting agencies and services. Those are the ones that have a chance to see them play. Other questions coming in on Brunchin with Marinaro. Joining me today, Stu Cowan from the Montreal Gazette. Mike Garon, do you think Luke Richardson should be given the team to coach for the rest of the season? Could help the young players. Stu, if I'm the president of the Cayden Primeau fan club, I think you might be the president of the Luke Richardson fan club. So your thoughts?
I have a ton of respect for Luke Richardson, and more importantly, the players on the Canadians do. I mean, Ben Sherratt last year when Richardson took over, when Ducharme was in COVID protocol, and I asked him, and he said we'd all skate through a wall for Luke Richardson, especially the defensemen because we work with him every day, but also the forwards. Luke Richardson is a class individual. He was his career speaks for itself. He came in as an 18-year-old and played in the NHL when it was a lot different league, a lot tougher league. He was a tough defenseman. He would fight. He would play. He played 20-odd years in the NHL. He's respected and liked by everyone. And I've written a few times that to me,
They'll never put him there, Stu. Stu, they'll never put him there.
Sorry?
They'll never put him there.
No, and I'm going to say why, because I've written a few times already. The easy fix right now is if Molson, as I mentioned, he doesn't want to pay a third head coach. You bring in Luke Richardson as the interim head coach until the end of the season. He's already shown he can do it during the playoffs last year. He was behind the bench when the Canadians won the Vegas series, and you have him ride it out until the end of the season. It won't happen because Luke
Randy Cunneyworth
doesn't speak French, and we all remember Randy Cunneyworth. And Jeff Molson's already.
Who, by the way, has
because of Jeff Gorton, and he's not going to deal with another one because of Luke Richardson. So Luke Richardson will be a head coach. You were saying before, Tony, about mark my words, Jeff Petry will be traded. Mark my words, Luke Richardson will be a head coach in the NHL one day, but it won't be in Montreal.
All right. I might take you up on that one, by the way. I'm not so sure he's going to be a head coach in the National Hockey League, but I do agree with you. He won't be a head coach for the Montreal Canadiens. Oh, and by the way,
he would be a big candidate if the Ottawa job opens up.
I'm sure he would be. No, I'm sure he would be. You're right. He was an assistant coach there for the longest time, and he is loved in Ottawa like you can't believe. By the way, as terrible as Randy Cunneyworth was during the regular season, has a higher winning percentage than Dominic Ducharme has in regular season hockey as well.
He was a really good coach in the AHL, Randy Cunneyworth.
Yes, very good. Yeah,
team when he was coaching there, and he got
Sabres farm team, I think.
Thrown under the bus after that, and that was it.
The Sabres farm team, I think. Was he coaching Rochester, if memory serves me well? I don't remember, but it was a long time ago. But
he sort of, he came in, he got thrown into a horrible situation here.
Yeah.
And then the whole language issue. I remember people protesting outside the Bell Center, and we're going to stop drinking Molson beer. And that's why, Luke Richardson, as I said, to me, it would make sense. But I almost wouldn't wish that on Luke Richardson either, because he would be put into a situation similar to what Randy Cunneyworth was put in.
All right, here's a question. This coming in from Steven Vukovic. Do you guys think we have too many left-handed young defensemen? Other than Brook and Mailloux, who do we have on the right side? Stu?
Well, we were talking earlier about drafting by the best player available. I don't think you're going to start drafting a defenseman just because he shoots left or because he shoots right. There's more left-handed, for whatever reason, there's more left-handed defensemen around than there are right-handed defensemen. Then it's not just the Canadians who have that issue. It's a thing around the league. I don't know why, but it just seems to be that most defensemen are left-handed shots. Romanov is left. Jordan Harris is left. Gooley is left. Yeah, there's a lot of lefts. You're right about that. But as I said, what you're going to draft a defenseman just because he shoots right over a guy who's left who's better. So to me, if you're the top defenseman can play on both sides. It's it's a little bit more difficult on your offside. Some guys actually. There's some defensemen who prefer playing on their offside, just like there's some wingers who prefer playing on their offside. So it's in a perfect world you'd have more right-hand shots, but as I said, I don't think the Canadians aren't the only team in that situation. Alan Hunter, is Jordan Harris going to sign? I think it all depends on how many defensemen the Canadians can move out. So whether Jordan Harris thinks there's an opportunity that he can make the big team next year and play a lot of minutes, and I think that's the most important thing. And B, if Kent Hughes were to be named general manager of the Montreal Canadiens and both his boys play at Northeastern with Jordan Harris, I think that's something that could obviously help. I'm not so sure Kent Hughes is going to take the job, though. I don't think he will, knowing the players that he represents. I don't think he will. Stu? How do you look at the Jordan Harris situation? If you go back, if you Google my name and Jordan Harris, I wrote a column the first year he was at rookie camp. I didn't know who he was. I knew the name. As I mentioned before, I haven't seen him play before. He was playing high school hockey. And the first time I watched him at rookie camp, he caught my eye right away. And I was like, who is this kid? He was rushing the puck. He was confident with the puck. He was moving it. He was fun to watch. And I interviewed him after my first time watching him. I was so impressed by him. He's one of the few guys at a rookie camp who has really caught my eye like that. Cole Caulfield did also, just because of the way he could shoot the puck. But Jordan Harris really, really impressed me. And I wrote a column about him back then. And he's a smart kid. He wanted to finish his university. I applaud him for that. He wanted not just the hockey, he wanted the whole experience about being around university. Yeah. I think that was really smart of him to do that. And from a hockey standpoint, moving forward is also smart because now the ball's in his hand, right? He can decide where he wants to go. And I think he's been advised very, very, very well. He wasn't in a rush to come. Cole Caulfield, after he was drafted, and he's talking about going to Wisconsin or where he was going to go. And he said, I just want to go the quickest route to the NHL. And when we asked him, well, what are you going to study at Wisconsin? He didn't know. So he was going to Wisconsin to study hockey.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Jordan Harris is, the university meant a lot to him. He wanted to go there and he wanted to graduate, and his parents were happy to back him up with that. And he's going to, moving forward, he's going to play in the NHL at some point. He wasn't in a rush, and I think that's a smart thing. And again, I think he's had smart advice. Will he sign here? As I said, the ball's in his court. The agent now has some leverage to say with the Canadians, well, what chances does he have of making the team?
Yeah. You think they're going to, we both agree that Sherratt
I'd be surprised if he does sign here, because I think he might, he's a Boston area kid. Maybe the Bruins make him an offer.
We both agree that Sherratt will not be back. He'll be moved. I'm certain that Jeff Petry will be moved. And if he's not moved at the deadline, he'll be moved at the draft or in the offseason. Jeff Petry will not be a Montreal Canadian next season. I would bet the house on it. Okay. There's a couple of players whose contract is up at the end of the year who are defensemen. Chris Weidman is one, Kulak is the other. Weidman, I think, is going to be moved because of depth. I think there's a team that will want to pick him up. Kulak, I wouldn't be surprised if it goes either way, but if I had to bet, I'd probably bet 51% he re-signs with the Canadians, 49% they let him walk.
Yeah,
or trade him, I mean.
I find Kulak's an underrated guy. If Kulak's on your third defense pairing in any NHL team, that's not bad. I mean, Kulak, he can skate, he can move the puck. When he's confident, he plays better. He runs into trouble sometimes when he's overused. And that's happened a lot in Montreal just because of injuries and whatnot. He's played more minutes than he probably should play. But if I was another NHL team and I was looking for a third pairing defenseman, I'd have interest in Brett Kulak. And you mentioned all these guys who might be gone. Maybe that does open a spot for Jordan Harris next season if the Canadians think he's capable of stepping right into the NHL. And that's something that's going to be negotiated with his agent and the Canadians and Harris. Like, okay, if he goes down to the AHL next season, what are his chances that you guys are going to call him up? What's the plan for Jordan Harris moving forward? And maybe if he thinks his best chance to get to the NHL is with the Canadians, maybe he takes that path. But again, in the back of my mind, here's a kid who grew up as a Bruins fan. He's a Boston boy. And you wonder if the Bruins want to sign this kid. You wonder if that's where his heart is, and that's might be where he wants to go.
Canadians play the Islanders, are set to play the Islanders in New York. Tomorrow night, they play the Rangers in New York on a Wednesday, the Devils in Jersey on Thursday. And then they're off for 4 days. And then after that, next week, Tuesday, they'll end up playing in Tampa versus the Lightning. And then a couple of days later in Carolina versus the Hurricanes. It's not going to get any easier. 8 of the 12 forwards at practice today have played this season with the Laval Rocket, mostly with the Laval Rocket. But as I have said, since training camp, and I will continue to say for the rest of the season, Stu Cowan, no pain, no shame.
Yo, what, Tony? It's what's been fun the last few games, and there hasn't been a lot fun to watch about the Canadian season, is just watching some of these guys getting called up and just how hard they work. I mean, I was so happy for Laurent Dauphin.
He works very hard.
Went to the dirty area, scored the goal, and after the game, there was Mark Denis interviewing and saying, 5 years since you scored your last goal in the NHL, and he said, well, it's hard to score in the NHL when you don't play in the NHL, which is a great line. So, guys like Pizzetta, guys like him, they're showing that compete level that wasn't there when all the Canadians players were healthy. And that goes back to what we were talking about before with Ducharme. You were mentioning the coach. The players didn't look ready to play, and the compete level was horrible. They were losing one-on-one battles all over the ice, which is a huge problem. And to me, that's on the coach. And that's why I think when Petry spoke, he spoke for a lot of guys in that room. They're just not happy with the way this team is set up.
Yes, they were demoralized because the team was inferior on paper and they got the news of Carey Price. That's all true. And yes, the Canadians were missing some key players. It's all true. It's also true that it was up to Ducharme to get them motivated again, to make them believe and to have them playing a system that would give them the most success. And unfortunately for him, he wasn't able to do that. Stu, why don't we do this? We'll end it off, maybe 3 speed questions. We'll try and get to 3 questions in 3 minutes, and we're done.
Let me just add one last thing.
Yes.
Tony, we're talking about the coach.
Tell me.
Doesn't matter what business you're in. If your business is digging ditches and your boss is telling you to dig a ditch in a way that doesn't make sense to you, you're not going to be that inspired digging your ditch. Or if you're a bricklayer or whatever job you are, in our job, if you're a radio host and your boss is telling you to do something that doesn't make sense to you, and you can see it's not working, you're going to get frustrated, right? And it's going to show. And I think that's what's happened with the Canadiens.
Andy, most likely Carey won't get traded until the draft because of the cap. How do you bring Carey Price back into the lineup to showcase him for a trade and not hurt the chances of a top 3 draft pick?
This team is so bad in front of Carey Price. I mean, Carey Price might steal a game or 2, not more than that. I mean, and Carey Price, Carey Price in the playoffs last season was amazing, but Carey Price the 3 regular season before was really inconsistent. He's been off for so long, coming back from the knee injury, coming back from whatever the issues were that had him in player assistance program. I wouldn't expect him to be consistent when he comes back and plays this season.
I don't think you have to showcase Carey Price. Mind you, I don't know if you... Look, it's not going to be easy to trade him. Let's be honest here. There's an expansion team that didn't want him without giving up nothing in return. Now, what I would have done is I would have called that expansion team and I would have said, okay, listen, you're not going to pick him up. Let's make a deal. We're willing to pick up half the salary. I think the Canadiens needed to have been a lot more proactive when Carey made himself available. Anyone who's remotely close to the situation knows that Carey Price wanted to go to Seattle. And anyone who doesn't believe that is either incredibly naive or incredibly unintelligent. All right.
But Tony, even if at that point the Canadiens were willing to eat half of his salary, Seattle they probably had the NHL's a small world. People talk. They probably had an idea of whatever the issues were Carey was having off the ice.
Yeah.
They also were aware of the knee surgery. So they weren't going to make it any kind of a deal for him, I don't think, until they saw Carey Price on the ice playing and proving he was healthy. So that's something that we might see now. If Carey Price does come back and play now and plays well, maybe Jeff Gorton does call Seattle because, yes, Carey Price did want to go to Seattle. Whatever was said, about, we just did it so we could protect Jake Allen or whatever. Maybe not. No, if Carey Price comes back and he does play, then Jeff Gorton can make the call there. He's healthy now. We can see everything is going on. If we eat half of his contract, are you going to be willing to take him?
When do we start talking about the fact that Vegas needs cap space and Weber is the best option by far? Hey, listen, here's the deal. Everyone knows that Shea Weber is unofficially retired, and it's unofficially, and they're going to have to try and do something there in regards to his contract. It's not if, it's when. Next up.
Jonathan Drouin basically let it slip that Shea Weber is officially retired.
Yeah.
Because after they all went to the Seattle football game there, and I'm sure they're all asking Shea what's up, and he must have said, I'm done. I'm not coming back.
Marco says, if you could have Danault, Perry, or Tatar back on the Habs roster, who would you take back? For me, the answer to this one is simple. First of all, I don't want any of them back because I want a tank. No pain, no shame. But the most valuable player to the Canadiens of the 3, with all due respect to Perry and Tatar, it wasn't even close. It was Phil Danault. I thought last year in the playoffs, the Montreal Canadiens' best players in the playoffs, everyone played great. Everyone. But for me, the 4 that stood out the most, the 4, Price, Weber, Suzuki, and Danault. Agreed?
Yeah, without a doubt, Danault. Without a doubt. I mean, Ray Ferraro, who I think is probably the best hockey analyst out there.
He's fantastic.
He said, if Austin Matthews gets paid $10 million a year to score goals, how much is the guy worth who can stop him from scoring?
And you know what? I think everyone may have underestimated what that value should have been, with the exception of the Los Angeles Kings in the offseason.
The other thing, too, people look at Danault's stats and they only had this many goals. He's no good offensively. Ask Max Pacioretty how good Danault is offensively. Ask Alex Radulov. Ask all the guys who played with him. Because it's hard to create offense when you can't get the puck out of your own end and get moving through the neutral zone. Philip Danault that's why LA is paying him the money they're paying him. In his own end, he's outstanding. He gets the puck out of your own end and he gets the puck up to the wingers who can score goals. So not all offense is recognized in goals and assists. You got to get the puck out of your own end. You got to get the puck through the neutral zone before you can get any goals. And that's Philip Danault's strength. He knows what he's good at. He does it very well. And another case of one of those players, maybe you don't appreciate, or I did, but maybe a lot of people don't appreciate him until he's gone.
And he's a player that makes the structure look a lot better than it actually is, because once he's gone, there's some players who are questioning what the structure is and where it's gone.
And loved and respected by all his teammates.
And was very, very proud to wear that jersey 100%. As I'm proud to have you on the Sick Podcast, Stu Cowan, anytime. Hey, what are you doing again next week on Sunday? We'll talk to you then.
Let's do it again, Tony.
All right. Brunchin with Marinaro, the Sick Podcast. Follow us on YouTube. Subscribe. It's free. The beauty of it, it's free for you, but the more people watch it and the more people advertise, the more I get paid. What a beautiful world it is. Have a great Sunday. Ciao for now.
See you guys.